in the following manner, because what we have to do when we talk about injustice is get people indignant, investors and workers. You can imagine what it would be now. 70% of the people want out of Iraq. They oppose the Bush-Cheney criminal regime on that important quagmire, and yet nothing moves. And that's a sign that there's a huge blockage operating. And so we have to touch people with descriptions and narrations of different kinds of corporate control, because some kinds of corporate control will leave people cold. A lot of people don't really have empathy to the inner city exposure to business crime, predatory lending, and rent-on rackets, and payday loan interest rates of 400%, and landlord abuses, and asbestos and lead. Other people resonate with the corporate seizure of our tax dollar, where a huge portion of the tax dollar that goes to Washington is cycled back to corporate welfare, bailouts, all the usual things that we've heard of. We've heard about. Now they're trying to bail out the banks. People who really get angry about that. And we've got to enter that constituency as well. And there are people who are really upset about the desecration of our Constitution. Isn't it interesting that there's a push to ban the Constitution, the desecration of the flag, but not the desecration of the Constitution. And here we have a criminal war, a war of aggression, bluntly called the war of choice in Iraq. And what happens? It violates the Constitution repeatedly. It violates federal statutes, international treaties that we are signatories to, that have the force of federal law. We have the most impeachable president and vice president in American history, war of aggression, torture, violation of civil rights and civil liberties, arrests of thousands of people without charges, imprisonment without attorneys. We have the signing statements, which is a suction of the constitutional authority that's ascribed to Congress. So there are people upset with that. There are people upset with another kind of circle of control. That is, blocking us from accessing our own government and turning our government into a servant of the people. That means the courts, the Congress, the state legislatures, and the executive branch at the national state level. Every single agency and department in Washington is overwhelmingly controlled by corporations. They have 10,000 political action committees. They put their high executives in high government positions, and they have 35,000 full-time lobbyists connected with their supporters around the country. Just imagine that. Even the Labor Department is not controlled by the Tribune. It's controlled by corporations. So it isn't just the government under the control of corporations. The government is the corporation now. The corporation is the government. If you look at what Blackwater, the stories, and the outsourcing to Halliburton, more and more government functions, hundreds of billions of dollars, are being contracted out to corporations. Corporations now monitor welfare rights screening. They monitor national security screening for people who want to work in government. These are private corporations performing government functions. That's the kind of thing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt called fascism. In 1938, he said, when government is controlled by private economic power, that is fascism. He said that to the Congress. Really upset about the greed and power. That the head of Walmart makes $11,000 an hour, 8 hours a day, and workers are making $6.50, $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour in Walmart. And that's not the highest paid executive. People feel that that's not fair for some reason. There are people who are upset about corporate control of our genes, our genetic inheritance, which are now patenting gene sequences. They're upset the way corporations undermine parental authority, create a lot of friction in the household by marketing direct to children. Junk food, junk drink, junk toys, military toys, violent programming, etc. That reaches another constituency of people. There are people who are really upset about that they can't have their voice. They can't be heard. The corporations control our public airways, although we own them. They control our public lands, although we own them. They control our public research and development dollars, which give free drugs to the drug companies, and then they sock it to us for credible prices. And it's government, it's owned by the people. Those dollars, research and development, that developed the semiconductor industry, the aerospace and biotech, and a lot of the pharmaceutical industry, they weren't done by these corporations. They didn't want to put their money in there. It was government tax dollars, your tax dollars. Some people really get upset about that. And so you have to interface with more and more people, different cycles of corporate control. There are all kinds of great books that have come out. Naomi Klein's book on the stock doctrine takes the corporate government connections globally to a new level. Brand new book by David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize reporter for the New York Times, called No Free Lunch, will outrage you in the way that the middle class tax dollars being seized in so many ways by corporations and rich people who use tax havens and all kinds of maneuvers to not only take it away but actually to distort public budgets. Half of our federal operating budget is now military expenditures. No more Soviet Union. Communist China is not a threat. They want our jobs and industry, and our companies are obliging. Some people are very upset at the lack of patriotism of corporations. These corporations were born in the USA. They became very, very profitable on the sweat of workers. When they had to be bailed out, they went to Washington. When they got in trouble overseas in their exploitation, they called on the U.S. Marine. And yet they have no allegiance whatsoever to our country or community, other than control them or abandon them to communist China or some other oligarchic or dictatorial regime where they can pollute at will and grind the workers down to a frazzle. Some people are really upset. Others are upset about the devastation of the air and water and soil that are the prerequisites of life on Earth, and how there seem to be no boundaries to the greed and power of the commercial instinct driven by corporate hegemony, control of our elections, control of our media, control of the workplace, control of technology, and control of our government. They go for total control. Anybody who doubts that, go back to history. How far did corporations or the business community go when they could go as far as they wanted to? It's called slavery. It's called sweatshops in the third world. It's called denying the basic necessities of human beings in order to get that nth degree of profit and greed and power, which is why every major religion warned its adherents, do not give too much power to the commercial interests, to the merchant class, because it brooks no tolerance when it collides against human rights, civic values, access to democracy, the voice of the people, health and safety, and respect for posterity. Now, what do we have for assets? We have enormous solutions to so many of our problems. Energy, solar energy, renewable energy, geothermal energy, massive efficiencies, sustainability, recycling, housing. We don't know how to provide housing for people in this country. We should be ashamed of that. There are ideas in the third world where they can build housing from the dirt under the peasants' feet. Very elegant. There are hundreds of ways to provide housing. Taxes. Do you know how to reform the taxes? We had a conference in June last year, which is online entirely. It's called tamethecorporation.org. Tamethecorporation.org. And it took they challenged the corporate power to its furthest degree in terms of concept and remedy. And the two principal umbrellas were that the sovereignty of the people must be constitutionally and statutorily supreme and must subordinate the power of the corporate entity. Subordination of the corporations to the sovereignty of the people must ring from coast to coast as a political issue. And the second is displacement. Every time We move in populist venues. Like Medicare for All displaces the grasping, gouging health insurance industry. Solar energy displaces Exxon and Peabody Coal. Organic agriculture and community agriculture undermines the giant agribusiness corporation. This kind of alternative economy displaces, weakens, and eventually will supplant with safer and more decent and more environmentally benign goods and services. I urge you to look at your leisure at that website and encourage people who are taking courses on corporate issues to study that website. It's 2 full days on tamethecorporation.org. And when you talk to people and they show any skepticism about corporate power, just ask them the following. You want health care for all? Who says no? It's the health insurance industry, the drug companies, and the HMOs. You want living wage? Who says no and makes it stick? It's McDonald's. It's Burger King. It's Walmart. You want fair taxation? Who's against fair taxation? Who's against taxing things we like the least, like speculation and the trillions of speculated dollars that aren't taxed? It's the corporation. You want no pollution? You want to restrict and replace the silent cumulative violence that we too charitably call pollution? Who's opposing that? It's the corporate polluters who's opposing it. You want peace in the world, and you want a country to wage peace and become a humanitarian superpower? Who's opposed to that? The Lockheed Martins. What Eisenhower condemned as a military-industrial complex. Just ask, who keeps saying no? And you know what the focus of a Green Party and an alternative party political movement has to be. That's what it's about. So, problems are clear, the injustices are there. They're getting worse. In 1996, when I went to the Green Party convention, and I think of all the complaints that were made about injustice, almost without an exception, it's worse. It's worse today. The peak average wage for 80% of the workers in this country is still 1973. Adjusted for inflation. We weren't in the Iraq, Afghanistan quagmire. The Palestinians were not being barricaded, drained of water, colonized, and otherwise overwhelmed as they are today. By the way, those landowners on the Mexican border who are now really objecting because it's a big $9 billion Boeing-built wall underway, and their lands are being split and they can't control their own lands, they ought to have a big rally with a big banner entitled, "We're now all Palestinians." So we come to the conclusion, how much are we going to give? Just one. How much are we going to give? Wait. How much are we going to give? How much are we just one more minute. How much are we going to give of our time, talent, and energy? That's really the disconnect. And we all know that. And no party is ever going to grow unless it has full-time organizers. No social justice movement, whether it's civil rights, abolition, women's rights, ever prevail without full-time organizers in the field. And that means to reflect Peter Camejo's urging and Ross's urging. I hope before you leave here that you'll make the best and largest contribution to the Green Party of California. Thank you.